Okay, seeing that we have a quorum, and it is after 7 o'clock, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Before we get started, just a little housekeeping notice. There's been a whole bunch of documents handed out to everybody around here, but there were just 4 documents that were handed out by the town, so you know that. All right, there's the official warrant, which you all should have a copy of. The bylaw amendments, which were submitted to the town clerk from the planning board. A letter from the town manager just trying to explain to everyone the process of town meeting and help you out. And a document, which is an amendment form. So if you wanted to make an amendment from the floor, which I would require to be in writing, this form will help you do that. Those are the only 4 that were handed out from the town. There was another one that sort of looked like it was from the town, and there's a whole bunch of them. So just understand that those are the 4 that came from the town. All right, we still do have people checking in, but I'm going to get the meeting started. And we will start with Ken Fowler.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Oh, give me a moment. Welcome, citizens of Lenox. Ken Fowler, 22 Tucker Street, Lenox, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Moderator, I move to waive the reading of the warrant and return of service thereof. I also move to authorize the moderator to declare a 2/3 vote on voice votes if he deems it so.
Do I have a second? Okay, this is just a housekeeping rule that allows me to declare on a voice vote, a majority or a 2/3 vote. If anyone questions the call, it just takes 7 people in here to redo the count by a hand count. This is just housekeeping that we do all the time to hopefully keep the meeting moving on.
All those in favor?
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes.
Mr. Moderator, I move to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or otherwise provide the sum of $1,683,205.23 or any other sum for capital expenditures in the Department of Public Works, and further to provide for said appropriations to transfer the following sums: $950,000 from free cash as certified on July 1, 2018, $700,000 from retained earnings in the Water Enterprise Fund as certified on July 1st, 2018.
Hold on. Okay, we're going to start that from the beginning.
Mr. Moderator, I move to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or otherwise provide the sum of $1,683,205.23 or any other sum for capital expenditures in the Department of Public Works, and further to provide for said appropriations to transfer the following sums: $950,000 from free cash as certified on July 1, 2018, $700,000 from retained earnings in the Water Enterprise Fund as certified on July 1st, 2018, an unencumbered balance of $33,205.23 appropriated and borrowed under Article 17 of the May 5, 2016 Annual Town Meeting warrant in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 20 of the general laws, and which balance is no longer needed to complete the project for which it was initially borrowed, or to take any other action in relation thereto.
Is there a second? Explanation?
Most towns appropriate funds and bid road work in the spring. However, contrary to recent practice, the selectmen would like to bid road work in the winter believing that a more competitive bid environment exists prior to the construction season. Current plans call for paving West Dugway Road and West Mountain Road in 2019. While repaving West Mountain Road, the town will also replace the problematic transite water line underneath the roadway. Budget numbers are based on a very conservative cost estimate. If bids are more favorable than cost estimates, DPW will seek to upgrade additional roads and water lines in future projects. No paving money was appropriated at our May 2018 annual town meeting, nor will any be asked for at our May 2019 annual town meeting. Basically, we're doing 2 years of paving in 1 year.
All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you. Article 2, Mr. Moderator, I move to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or otherwise provide the sum of $30,000 or any other sum to the Permanent Building Committee for planning, design, and consultant expenses related to facilities for the police, fire, and ambulance operations, or to take any other action in relation thereto.
Is there a second? Second. Explanation.
This request will fund work for the Permanent Building Committee as it seeks to study long-term solutions to deficiencies in the central fire station and the basement of the town hall housing the police department and ambulance. At the conclusion of this study, the Permanent Building Committee will make recommendations on what facilities are adequate for the fire, police, and ambulance departments. Included in this study will be the feasibility of a public safety facility, which has been discussed in the past but not formally explored. Recommendations are expected to be made along with appropriate funding requests at the May 2019 town meeting.
All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm in the wrong spot. My hearing aids in. Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept a gift of land located at 179 Housatonic Street, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to execute such documents and instruments or take any action needed thereof to effect the vote taken hereunder upon such terms and conditions as the Board of Selectmen may deem appropriate.
Okay. Explanation.
Thank you. The town is poised to take this undeveloped lot consisting of 30,190 square feet for non-payment of real estate taxes. However, as an alternative to expending town funds through attorney's fees and other filings, the town would like to accept the land as a gift from the owner for outstanding taxes owed with no additional consideration. The town has agreed. Town meeting authorization to accept the gift of land would empower the Board of Selectmen to perform its due diligence and review the property with the good faith ability to accept the land if found to be in the town's best interest to do so.
All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Kate McNulty Vaughn, Planning Board and Affordable Housing Committee, 10 Post Road, here in Lenox. Mr. Moderator, Article 4. I move that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaw by amending Section 5.2, Schedule of Uses, and amending Section 9.1, Multifamily and Townhouse Buildings, with a new subsection, 9.1.5, by right provision as exhibited in the most current copy on file in the office of the town clerk. Mr. Moderator, could I make an overall
No, not yet.
explanatory comment? I meant to
Not
do
yet.
that before I started. All right.
Yeah. Can I have a second first? There's a second. Okay, now you can do both.
I don't usually stand at this mic, so I forgot my first step, which is, this is the Town of Lenox zoning bylaw. This is the Town of Lenox housing production plan. This is the Town of Lenox zoning map. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. So the articles, there you go. Thank you. So the articles that we're addressing here are from the zoning bylaw, which was first written in 1969 in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 48. Regulations agreed upon by 2/3 of voters at town meetings since that time. And this, as I pointed out, was the Housing Production Plan, which was updated and approved in 2017 by the Lenox Planning Board and the Board of Selectmen. The goal of the articles before you, Articles 4 through 8, is to make recommendations made in the Housing Production Plan, the HPP, and implement them by making changes in our zoning bylaw which create opportunities for additional housing, allowing more multifamily housing and smaller units, more housing stock, more housing choices for all age groups and income levels. Why do these changes make sense? The HPP points to data that show that almost half of all households in Lenox are single people living alone, 1,167. Multifamily settings in smaller units could well meet needs for housing for becoming or remaining a resident of Lenox. A positive vote on the zoning bylaw amendments will, by special permit, which I believe I need to go to, allow the development of multifamily dwellings in the C1A zoning districts from New Lenox Road to the Pittsfield line, and a separate C1A parcel on the eastern corner of Housatonic Street in the bypass. All right, so let's go back to the maps. So the locations we're talking about are, whoops, I have to hold it down, are the C1A location up here and the C1A location over here. It will also allow the development of multifamily dwellings in the commercial zone, the commercial C zoning district in Lenox Village and Lenox Dale, and that would be by right. So we're talking about, whoops, all right here, large red, sorry I'm so nervous, and down here in the Dale. All right. And in the C districts, projects unable to comply with district standards will be allowed to seek a special permit from the ZBA. A vote yes on Articles 5, 6, 7, and 8 will be specific to multifamily, allowing multifamily units to be any size, so long as they comply with building safety and sanitary and housing codes. Should I read over 4 again, or just assume everybody's with me?
No, they have a copy of it.
Okay. Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions or comments on Article 4? Let me just start something here. I should probably give you guys a little housekeeping. If you would like to speak, please stand up and come down to one of the 2 mics down front. I will
Karen Montero, 12 Golden Hill Road in Lenoxdale. So just, can you describe the size, what you meant by size? Is it physical size of the building, height?
In this case, we're not actually addressing size. In Article 4, we're simply addressing allowing multifamily homes in these two areas, C1A. I'll go to that slide. Nope, I'll go back. If you look at this, it's allowed in the C1A district and the C district. So we're not talking essentially about size here. Those
This
are the
article is
later
only
ones.
referring to allowing it.
I meant to do my prefatory remarks before I started on the other articles. So this is only allowing these multifamily uses to become possible in these two zoning districts areas.
Any other questions? All right. Seeing none, all in favor of Article 4, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. It carries. And that was a 2/3 vote needed, folks. Article 5.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaw by deleting the definition of apartment in section 4, definitions, so there is no longer a minimum square foot area for multifamily dwelling units as exhibited in the most current copy on file in the office of the town clerk.
Is there a second? Explanation?
Currently, the definition of apartment in the Lenox zoning bylaw is primarily unused in the rest of the zoning bylaw. So we would like to just eliminate that entirely from our definition section. And it also contains a requirement of 700 square feet as a minimum size that would be allowed. An affirmative vote will strike the definition and the size requirement. Multifamily residential units will still need to comply with building and health code minimum size standards, but no longer in our bylaw.
This as well as a 2/3 vote. All in favor of Article 5, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Carries.
Mr. Moderator, Article 6. I move that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaw by revising Section 9.1.4, dwelling, two-family, otherwise known as a duplex, so that the size requirement is stricken as exhibited in the most current copy on file in the office of the town clerk.
Is there a second? Second. Explanation.
Currently, a dwelling unit within a duplex must be at least 700 square feet in size. An affirmative vote will strike this size requirement. Individual dwelling units will still need to comply with building and health code minimum size standards. Mr. Moderator, I have an amendment to this article.
Okay.
In preparing for tonight's presentation, I came across what we call a housekeeping error. And since we're in 9.1.4, it seemed an appropriate time to fix this mistake. The amendment form is before the town officers. I conferred with Land Use Director Gwen Miller on Friday about this. The Planning Board has not had a meeting for me to bring this up to them. So I'm, as an individual person, not a Planning Board representative, presenting this. I think with the, at least the Land Use Director's blessing. I would like to, I move to amend the motion under the above article as follows. Revise section 9.1.4, dwelling two-family duplex, by removing and replacing the sentence, no unit contains more than two families. The above sentence should be replaced with, only one family shall reside in each unit. Clearly, if no more than two...
Excuse me.
Sorry.
There is amendment proposed. Is there a second? Thank you. Now, go ahead.
Now the explanation. Thank you. The first sentence is being carried over from the current bylaw, which misstates what a duplex is intended to be, a 2-unit building housing 2 families, 1 in each unit. But that's not what that sentence says. What it says is that no more than 2 families can reside in each unit. Whoops. That means 4 families in the building. So this is the reason that we are correcting that error. It's probably a case of a find and replace change of wording from the past where we changed from building to unit and didn't read the whole sentence.
Okay, our first vote is going to be on the amendment. If you agree with the amendment, if you agree with the amendment as proposed, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Carries? Okay. Now, this vote is on Article 6. All in favor of the Article 6, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. It carries. Article 7.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaw so that minimum area requirements for dwelling units and lot sizes are removed from Section 9.5, mixed-use development, as exhibited in the most current copy on file in the office of the town clerk.
Is there a second? Explanation?
Currently, mixed-use development requirements in the zoning bylaw include dwelling unit and, in this particular section, lot size requirements. An affirmative vote will strike these requirements. Dwelling units will still need to meet minimum size requirements laid out in the Building and Health Code.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Carries.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town, this is Article 8, I move that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaw so that the minimum area requirement for a dwelling unit is removed from Section 9.6.1, conversion of an existing dwelling, as exhibited in the most current copy on file in the office of the town clerk.
Is there a second? Explanation?
Currently, if a property owner wishes to convert an existing dwelling into a multifamily dwelling unit, each of those must be 600 square feet. Again, we have a different threshold here. An affirmative vote will simply strike this minimum square footage requirement.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Carries.
I'm done. Should be Tom.
Good evening. Tom Delasco, Vice Chair of the Planning Board, 12 Hillside Drive. Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaw by inserting adult marijuana uses into Section 5.2, Schedule of Uses, and deleting the existing Section 8.13, temporary moratorium on the sale and distribution of recreational marijuana, and inserting a new Section 8.13, Adult Use of Marijuana, Non-Medical, as exhibited in the most current copy on file in the office of town clerk.
Is there a second? Explanation.
The Lenox zoning bylaw currently allows for the location of medicinal marijuana businesses. An affirmative vote on Article 9 will allow for the location of recreational marijuana cultivation, processing, and dispensing within the town of Lenox. So the use table up behind me here shows where these places will be allowed in the town. So we're looking at retail as only being allowed by special permit, BA, Board of Appeals, in the C3A and C1A zones. So this clearly represents up in the 7 and 20 corridor, basically from down at the bottom here, you may not be able to see it, East Dugway Road, all the way to the Pittsfield line. Marijuana product manufacturer, research facility, cultivator, craft cooperative, testing lab, and transporter would all be allowed by right with site plan review. And then in the industrial zone, those same uses would also be allowed by right with site plan review, but retailer would not be allowed. These are all the general requirements and provisions, but this is just an example of what some of these places look like. This is a dispensary that's currently operating down in Great Barrington. And this is a cultivation processing, and this one also houses a dispensary that's down in Bridgewater. So per the state law, they have to be very nondescript type buildings. You can't have any blatant advertising. You can't have the big marijuana leaf as you're advertising and all that. It has to be very, very low key. That's it.
Okay. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I think we're going to do a hand count on that. So, oh, yeah. Sorry, we got to get up a little faster, so we know that. Sorry, Dick.
Gotta move a little faster.
I'll allow it while we're getting set up to do the hand vote.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. First of all, I'd like to thank,
Excuse me, Dick, we got to know who you are.
I'm sorry, Richard DeFazio, Pine Hill Road. I'd like to thank the Selectmen, Board of Selectmen, Mr. Ketchum, and the Planning Board for all the work they've done on this issue. But since the vote to legalize marijuana back in 2016, more than 200 out of the 351 Massachusetts communities, even though some voted to legalize the drug, have opted to either outright prohibit or place a moratorium on the regional marijuana. Lenox voted in the affirmative by a small vote, a little better than 1%. By placing a moratorium, Article 10, after the vote for zoning marijuana, Article 9, the one we're talking about right now, we will not be given the opportunity unless we vote no on Article 9. Therefore, I urge you to vote against Article 9, having to do with zoning of marijuana establishments. Let's look at some of the issues. Negotiation with businesses, okay? Traffic, environmental, and social issues, social studies have to be made. We can negotiate with businesses to pay up to 3% of the costs for these studies. Don't bank on it. The Cannabis Committee will have our back. Yeah, they will. Just a note on the Cannabis Committee. They were formed by the state right after the vote in 2016. They're a committee of 5 people, 4 of whom voted against the marijuana law, okay? But in order to do their civic duty, they decided to take the job of the Cannabis Committee and the $125,000 pay that goes with it. I called the commission last week, the Cannabis Commission, to ask a question. And the answer they gave me was, well, you've got to call the Attorney General's office. I called the Attorney General's office. They told me, you've got to call the Cannabis Commission. So that's where we are. They really haven't had time to set up for all the rules that are required for this marijuana study. So does the town have the time and resources to negotiate those items? In Colorado, their state marijuana regulations bureau, the people who are charged with making inspections, have 98 inspectors, but only 25% of those inspectors go out into the field to regulate the 3,000 facilities. Taxes. We can impose a 3% sales tax on retail businesses. Everybody thinks that's a real good boondoggle. Studies have shown that the revenue to the towns is negligible when you take into account the town has to spend money on public health, public safety, and regulation costs. Remember, the 3% tax is not an all-right marijuana business. Jobs. In Colorado, workers are paid a minimum wage, and there's an abundance of turnover. The environment. Article 9 allows for all 8 types of recreational marijuana businesses. I noticed that recently, what a coincidence, a for sale sign was put up on Route 7 and 20 across from where the Lenox shops were. Do you want a marijuana cultivator to be located there? There's a problem with effluents, where we may not control the flow of waste material, smoke, liquid industrial refuse, sewage discharge, and the like into our environment. Energy demand. A big downside to indoor cultivation is energy demand, especially for artificial lighting and air conditioning. Indoor marijuana growers consume 17 times more power than the average residents. Do we already have a problem with PCBs? Cultivators use 2.2 liters of water for every marijuana plant every day. In some cases, I've read where it takes up to 2 gallons per plant every day. Remember when we had a big drought some years ago in Lenox? We passed a law then to prohibit Lenox residents from installing irrigation systems. The residents were asked to limit water usage. We had to call on Pittsfield's water system to supply water to the northern sections of Lenox. Our reservoirs were taxed to the limit. Would a cultivator go out of business because of lack of water? And what about people who have wells in their water for the water supply? Are they going to have to worry about their well being contaminated? Bad odor, in other words, stink. The smell of cannabis is often compared to the smell of skunk. In Colorado, 30% of all the complaints to the Marijuana Commission are about the skunk smell that comes from the marijuana businesses. Imagine living in Lennoxdale and on East Street by the high school, having to live with a daily stench of skunk. The constant smells serve to reduce home values in those areas in Colorado. Auto insurance. In Colorado, Washington, and Oregon, states that legalize marijuana, there's a distinct correlation between car crashes involving marijuana users and a 6% increase in auto insurance. My greatest worry is that me or a family member would be unfortunate enough to get hit on by a pothead in an automobile. In Colorado, 6 years after legalization, use of marijuana by youths is up by 85%. Marijuana-related traffic fatalities have increased by 151%. Decriminalization. Legalizing marijuana in Colorado has increased criminal activity in that state. Canada and Portugal. I'll bet most of you here never thought in your wildest dreams we'd be talking about legalizing marijuana, but here we are doing that.
I think I'm
almost done.
Slow you down here.
To make it easier, Portugal, after first legalizing marijuana, has legitimized cocaine and heroin. Canada just legalized marijuana.
You're now getting out of order on the subject, though, because the subject isn't about that. So
Okay.
we're going to have to keep it right on.
Conclusion. What I outlined briefly is information that should have been widely disseminated before the 2006 national election. Just because some Massachusetts municipalities have okayed marijuana establishments, primarily for the 3% sales tax on retailers only, doesn't mean Lenox has to go along with this. Take into account all the things I've laid out. They're not fairy tales. Take into account what you want Lenox to continue to be. I urge you to vote no on Article 10 and to vote yes on Article 9 to have a moratorium until the next general election. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we did call a vote, and then I let Dick get up because he was a little slow getting up to the podium. So I'm going to allow more conversation here, and then we will start over with this vote.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'll keep this quick. I understand there's a big generation gap with this subject. At least that's what I
She didn't say who she is.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
gotta know who you are.
Sorry about that. Sonia Bykowski, 225 Main Street, Lenox. So I believe there's a bit of a generation gap as far as the subject goes. I'm a massage therapist. I have people coming to me for chronic pain a lot. And one of the reasons I'm a proponent of this is I have seniors coming to me who, and there's lots of medical, a lot of things to back up the fact that this is medicinal
Okay.
and has a lot of good.
I'm gonna.
Okay.
Again, this isn't whether or not marijuana is valid. We're talking
Okay.
about where it can go. It's already been voted that marijuana is now legal, so it's a matter of where it can be placed or if not.
Okay. To rebut just a couple, or just offer some more information on a couple of those statistics. Last year, 88,000 Americans died from alcohol-induced causes.
Okay,
There are-
we're still out of order. Still out of order. You got to keep it onto the subject of what's in the warrant and the article.
Okay. I have no problem, as a resident of this town, having any of these facilities along what is already a commercial corridor. Thank
That's
you.
very good.
Thanks. Thank you.
Ronaldo DeGallo from Orchard Drive. I just wanted to ask, it's a question. So for marijuana in the, where it's going to be allowed for retail, is that by special permit or by right?
That's by special permit.
Can I make a motion that it be by right if it meets the qualifications of the ordinance or the bylaw? That would be my motion to amend it, so it would be by right if you meet the qualifications established by the bylaw.
Okay, we need to have that in writing. Number one, you have a form on there, so you can just jot it down real quickly and hand it up to us, but we have to have in that writing. So let's just clarify, before I ask for a second, let's clarify what your amendment is, so I understand it.
With a special permit, they could say no, and it kind of becomes political. By right, if you meet the requirements of a bylaw, then by right you don't need special permission, basically. That's the difference.
All right, well, we just
by right.
Well, what's the amendment? I'm saying, how are you? You're saying, can you just make me a motion that actually works?
Sorry about this.
Yeah, we initially had it by right, and we changed it to special permit just so there was more oversight over it. Because there's come along with
Try to do it as quickly and shortly as I
Okay.
can. So,
No, that's fine. I just, like I said.
So just to clarify a little bit,
Wait a second, let's just get this up first. All right, so
Okay.
there's a motion to amend on the floor to allow marijuana by right for retail if bylaws merit. Is there? Oh, if bylaws are met. Sorry. To allow marijuana by right for retail if bylaws are met. That is the amendment. Wait, can I get a second on that before we do anything? There's a second. Okay, now we go. So I'm just going to ask really quickly for Tom to tell everyone what that changes.
What it changes is by having it as a special permit, that means that you automatically get kicked into another category of the zoning bylaw under site plan review, and then you have to meet, by asking for a special permit, you have to meet the 5 or 6 criteria. Does it meet community needs? Does it meet neighborhood character? Is there enough utilities in the town to handle what's being asked? Those sorts of things. So we felt, the planning board felt that by having a retail by special permit, it just added an extra level of oversight to the whole process.
Okay, we are voting on the amendment. We're voting on the amendment. So all in favor of the amendment the amendment to say, to allow marijuana retail by right if bylaws are met. That's the amendment. So we're voting on that amendment to amend the motion. So, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Okay. So now, by a hand vote. By hand vote. So this is what you need to have is your registration cards in your hands. Okay? And you're going to hold them high and keep them up there until, I haven't told you what to hold it up for yet, so you're a little early. All right, and hold them up there until we tell you to put them down, okay? We'll wait for these guys to get set so your arms aren't tired. You guys ready? Okay. All in favor of the article as written, please signify by raising your hand. This is Article 9, marijuana use. Without the amendment. Amendment was turned down, as written. Who's counting up top? Up here. Up there? Is everyone in sight? Yeah. Okay, you can put your hands down. All those opposed, please raise your cards. Yes. 252, 130. Do we have that number yet? Total number? No. How many we have? So, they can call for me.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we got some high math going on over here.
All right. So we have 252 for, 138 against. So it does not carry.
Okay, Article 10. Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to extend the time frame of the temporary moratorium on the sale and distribution of recreational marijuana in existing Section 8.13 so that the moratorium will remain in effect through June 30, 2019, as exhibited in the most current copy on file in the Office of Town Clerk.
Okay, explanation?
This moratorium extension has been placed on the warrant in case Article 9 fails to achieve a two-thirds vote.
Okay. If you want to talk, you need to come down to the microphone so that everyone knows who you are and you can identify yourself. I didn't see you over there. Sorry, Jeffrey. Go ahead.
That's all right. Jeff Lynch, 51 Taconic. My understanding is that if this does not pass, then marijuana facilities can go anywhere in town.
That is correct. When the moratorium runs
Tom.
out.
You can't unless I tell you to. You
Oh,
can't
sorry.
come on. That takes care of your question? There you go. Okay, go ahead and clarify, Tom.
So, so if this does not pass, the moratorium will run out at the end of the year. And then if someone comes forward and wants to put one of those marijuana establishments in town, it'll be handled just like any other retail business. So one could potentially be in downtown Lenox.
So my question is, I have
Go
a
ahead.
question. Ronaldo
Go ahead
Delgado.
and your name again.
For Ronaldo Delgado from 24 Orchard. Does this pass by a majority or two-thirds vote?
This is a two-thirds as well.
I'm in favor of lifting the moratorium. If we can't agree on a zoning law, I think the voters have overwhelmingly supported legalizing marijuana, and if everyone can't agree on a zoning law, I think we should lift the moratorium. I think the solution is to have a zoning law, not to continue to make marijuana illegal indefinitely.
Okay, this is Article 10. It requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor? Oops, hold on 1 second.
Sorry, Richard DeFazio, Pine Knoll Road. I just want to make a clarification now. We voted Article 9 down.
Correct.
We're voting to extend this moratorium till next June, right? And until then, if we vote in the affirmative for Article 10, yes, then nothing can happen until we have that meeting in June of next year, where we could vote to either prohibit marijuana or set up the zoning laws as was proposed in Article 9. Okay, thank you.
Okay. This is Article 10. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It carries. What are we going to do with 11? It's not even. We're not going to go right to 12, right?
Well, we need to table 11, so I'm just going to make a motion to table 11. Neil Maximilian, 754 East Street, Lenox. Mr. Moderator, I move Article 11 to take no action.
Is there a second? Explanation.
With the failure of Article 9 to pass, the discussion about taxing marijuana sales is no longer relevant.
Okay. All in favor of Article 11, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. All right, so we can set a few ground rules on the next one's going through, okay? As moderator, a couple of rules I'm going to make. First of all, if you want to speak on this, I ask you to, number one, speak to the question only. Come down, form a line at each of the microphones, and don't speak until you are recognized by the chair. I'm also going to put a 2-minute per person limit on each conversation. At the 2-minute mark, I'll tell you to wrap it up, and I'll give you a few seconds to wrap up your comments. Okay? And we're trying to move through these articles as quickly as possible. Cam.
All right. Article 12. Oh, sorry. Cameron Spalding, 480 Walker Street. Article 12. I move that the town vote to adopt a general bylaw requiring the inspection and registration of all short-term rentals in Lenox as exhibited in the most current copy on file in the office of the town clerk.
Is there a second? Explanation.
So the next two articles will both relate to short-term rentals. I have a feeling a lot of you knew that. An affirmative vote on Article 12 will require the inspection and registration of all short-term rental properties within Lenox. This bylaw does not necessarily outlaw anyone from using that type of rental. It simply requires that they register and inspect like other businesses in town. Other issues of location, home ownership, and seasonality of these rentals will all be handled in the next article on the warrant.
You got to come down, guys, in order to.
But yeah, a short-term rental is most commonly, I think a lot of people refer to Airbnb, HomeAway, those websites. So it is a rental of less than 30 days of a home. So this would not apply, either of these bylaws, to any year-long rentals or any rentals that are very popular of the season of Tanglewood or Shakespeare and Company that you rent to them for the season. That would not be under this bylaw.
Okay.
Ted Silverman, 520 East Street. As far as I understand, there are currently no building safety, sanitary, or Board of Health codes for short-term rentals in the state of Massachusetts. The state has been working on defining what a short-term rental is and what the regulations are around short-term rentals. They spent a lot of time on it this year. They did not come to a conclusion. They're going to keep working on it next year. It seems really ill-advised for us to be trying to put on our already overburdened building department the requirement to have to try to figure out how to inspect something that does not have a definition. A short-term rental of a room in someone's house differs from an in-law apartment, which differs from an entire building. There's no clear definition of what these codes are for short-term rentals in those different kinds of scenarios. So I would urge everyone to vote against this until the state defines what these things are. And at that point, absolutely, having inspections and registration is something that every short-term rental host who's been involved in this process is supportive of. We just want it done in a way that is quantified for us, so everybody understands what we're working toward.
Hi there, my name is Dave Nottig, 146 Hubbard Street in Lenox. My biggest concern with this is I think this is a thin end of a wedge that could be quite onerous. If I wanted to rent the, say, in-law unit at the bottom of my house to one weekend to somebody coming in, let's be honest, nobody's going to go through this process to be able to do that for somebody who's coming into town, who's maybe a friend of a friend, and you're going to charge them $150 a night for a weekend. What this is going to do is it's going to criminalize the behavior that people are going to do anyway, which I always think is the sign of a bad regulation, when effectively most of the people who might be affected by it will probably just ignore it and leave themselves open to a lawsuit from an angry neighbor instead. That strikes me as a bad call. So until there's a lot more clarity about what we mean by short-term rental, what the inspections look like, when they have to be done, I think there has to be a lot more work done before we start effectively criminalizing somebody renting a weekend a month in their house. That's it.
Hello, I'm Elle Valletto at 21 Schermerhorn Park. I am actually reading a letter from Deborah Rimler, who cannot be here this evening, and she was on the planning board. Dear Lenox friends, I'm reaching out about the vote at our town meeting tomorrow on short-term rentals, which means actually tonight. Renting a home for a week or two is an old pastime in many vacation communities like ours, helping homeowners to supplement their income. With the advent of home-sharing websites like Airbnb or VRBO, this activity has reached new prominence. I'm on the planning board in town, which is responsible for proposing new zoning regulations like the one before us. We have spent over a year, literally, holding meeting after meeting with townspeople and our board discussing this very issue. Unfortunately, when it came time to vote, the board decided to take a very restrictive stance on short-term rentals, which is essentially a ban in many regards. You have seen signs around town from a group of our neighbors who oppose these bylaws with the slogan, "Our homes, our choice." While the rights of homeowners are important, they're only one half of the equation that the planning board needs to balance. All of our homes or apartments in Lenox are situated in a community. Indeed, our job as a planning board was to find a balance between the rights of individual homeowners versus the best interests of our neighbors and Lenox as a whole. However, those zoning bylaw amendments that will come before you tonight are not reasonable balance between these two interests. Under the guise of, quote, protecting our community, the planning board has proposed legislation that is designed to make a homeowner's ability to rent their home on a short-term basis extremely difficult. Why else would the planning board have included a limit on 2 cars in a driveway for every short-term rental, regardless of the home size or available of off-street parking? Let's be real. A 4 or 5 bedroom home with a few acres of property outside of the town center could never realistically met this standard. Or why we require a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals for every short-term rental of a single-family home, perhaps to make the process extremely expensive and difficult for many homeowners.
You have to conclude.
Okay. The list goes on, and I'm just going to finish the last sentence. Voting against the proposed restrictions on short-term rentals tomorrow night isn't a vote saying that you don't want regulations on short-term rentals. It is telling the planning board members like me that we should come back to you in May with new regulations that are fair and in the best interest as Lenox as a whole.
All right, Thomas Valletto, 114 Plunkett Street. In preparation for this, I felt like a mosquito in a nudist colony. I wasn't really sure where to start. Obviously, we've hit on Obviously, we've hit on the vagueness of the issue. We do not have specifications, we have no state laws, and we actually don't even have a definition of a short-term rental, only that a few members of the board have put forth. In preparation of this, I thought about how I wanted to address this issue, and I would like to go back to the original foundation of property, and that was John Locke, one of the thinkers in the Enlightenment theory in the 17th century. Probably most prominently known for the theory of property, and his contention was that we don't have anything besides ourselves. Our innateness is the only thing to us. We go out and we make property, the labor of property. And the labor of property is the theory of natural law that holds that property originally comes by and about the extension of labor upon natural resources. We can expand that on that idea. Whether we believe land was created by God or the Big Bang Theory, there was a point where the earth was what it was, meaning there were no boundaries, there were no lines, there was no property. The only way property could be created was through labor, through your own work. The only thing you innately have is yourself, and therefore through your own labor, that labor enters into the object. Thus the object becomes the property of that person. The idea was fundamental for two very important reasons. First, that property was made for people and by people. And secondly, no entity, person, or group could override your individual property because it was your labor that constructed it, and therefore no entity was entitled to it more than you are. Even though most of our property today is an acquisition, the rights of that property still exchange and apply to the current owner. That's how we function as a civilization for over 200 years.
Please conclude.
And that's why we've been so successful. In conclusion.
No, I think you already concluded, Tom.
All right.
Let's go to the next one.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Eric Federer, 35 Cliffwood Street.
I was trying to call over here to get this group to come forward so I can see them.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
But go ahead, Eric.
No, would you like me to
It's
go
okay.
Yeah, Eric Federer, 35 Cliffwood Street, Lenox, and I will not play Rousseau to your Locke. I love my neighborhood. I love my town. We have a very harmonious group of people, and there's a reason for this preface. On the people whose property I'm about to speak about, I include them in that group. I like them. This is not personalized. This is about business. But 2 doors down from us, there is a beautiful, recently renovated Berkshire cottage by a lovely couple that don't live in it. It's a rental property. They come up rarely, and it's listed on HomeAway. Now, this is a residential neighborhood, so this is a commercial use in a residential neighborhood. The property is listed on HomeAway, and I will read some excerpts briefly from the description. Estate, 7,200 square foot. Bedrooms, 10. Bathrooms, 9.5. Sleeps, 17. Unobstructed parking for 8 vehicles, space for many more. I assume that that's a reference to Cliffwood Street, which I think we could probably all agree is really a satellite municipal parking lot during the summer. I'm fine with that, but if somebody wanted to come here, and I'll explain, proudly presenting this fully refurbished historic Berkshire cottage for your vacation, family gathering, corporate retreat, or other special event. So, commercial use in a residential zone, I think this is incredibly unfair to people like Tom and Suki, who own Stoneover, Tim and Nell, who own the Cornell Inn, and I'm going to cast 2 votes tonight in favor of regulating short-term rentals, not banning them. This is not a ban proposal. Thank you.
Beth Tracy Gambo, 47 Tucker Street. Mr. Moderator, I move for a secret ballot on this bylaw.
Okay. Can I get a second on that? Okay, so we'll get to that when it comes to ballot time on how we're going to go through all that. But for secret ballot, all in favor, please signify by saying. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Does anyone know what we're voting on?
That was just on the secret ballot, folks. Yes, sir. I haven't called it yet. No, he asked me what we were voting on. I'm sorry. I'm going to question my call on that and ask for a hand count, so there you go. No secret ballot on the hand count. I need a hand count on that, and then we'll resume our discussion on this item. So what we're going to vote on right now, with your hands in the air, is on a secret ballot. Didn't think this would get to this, but I couldn't call it. I just heard a lot of yelling. This is just, this is on this question. Secret ballot on this question. That is it.
Yeah, when they get ready. Yeah, it might be a minute.
Okay, this vote is for whether or not you want a secret ballot. A vote yes means you want a secret ballot on this question. This question alone. Okay, if you want a secret ballot, you vote yes. So all in favor of the secret, yes, sorry. Okay, I should explain that. Thank you for asking. So what's going to happen when it comes to secret ballot time, you'll come down, you'll present your registration card, you'll be given a card that has yes or no on it. You'll rip off the yes and the no, rip it in half. You throw one of them into the ballot, the other one into the garbage pail right next to it, and you walk away. That's how it'll work. So everyone with a registration card will get one of these yes-no ballots. Any other questions on that? On this vote, yes. In front of people.
Don't crumple it up and throw it away before you get to the box.
Right. You have to rip it and do it right in the box in front of the guards. And there'll be 3 lines, so it will hopefully go relatively quickly for it. But okay, again, we are, okay.
How are you counting the votes when you count them? Do you have 2 people counting every section, or only 1? Is there confirmation, in other words, of the vote of each section?
Jen? No. We have 4 counters counting the entire room. This is what we have. We have 4 people going across the entire room on the hand count. That was the question. How are we doing the hand count? I already did that. That's going to be counted. That is correct. Okay, again, we're voting on the secret ballot. A majority for this. For the secret ballot, we need only a majority. Okay, so all who would like to see the secret ballot, please raise your hands with your registration card in them up high. Okay, let's just, before we do this, why don't we put that down? All those opposed to the secret ballot, please raise high. No. All right, I'm going to call it without counting that this majority is no on the secret ballot. Moving forward on the question.
Mr. Moderator, Steve Seltzer, 390 Housatonic Street. Before I start, I'd just like to clarify that the 2 minutes allowance is for each warrant per person. Is that correct?
When you're up here, you get 2 minutes right now.
And then the next warrant, I get 2 minutes.
We start a whole new
clock. Thank you very much. I'm shocked that there would be a warrant presented for inspectional and registration requirements without any information about specifically what those are. It means that the requirements can become onerous, they can change, they can become unevenly applied. I'll give you a very specific example. If you were one of the 52 people in town who received a letter earlier this year that said you must immediately cease and desist having any kind of rental activity. It was onerous, it was unevenly applied. The people weren't even questioned about whether they even had any rental activities. So that's just how out of hand something like this can get. And I strongly encourage you to vote no on Article 12 until we can actually see and validate and agree on the exact inspection and registration requirements. And the state of Massachusetts is also putting in registration requirements. So this warrant is extremely premature until the state weighs in. So I strongly encourage you to vote no until we know exactly what we're voting for. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Moderator, Jim Harwood, 34 Walker Street, Lenox, Massachusetts. As you can see from the marijuana debate, the format for a conversation about a larger issue can become awkward in this format, and it's relevant to this issue because this seems like a small, possibly non-onerous issue, but as the subsequent warrants follow on, you'll see that there's ways to make it quite onerous. This section itself is very ill-defined, and I think is going to become a quagmire and quite difficult to administer. But as an architect, I can assure you that there's quite a list of onerous inspections that could be imposed on your home, particularly if, as will be suggested in later articles, the common use of a single-family house for occasional short-term rental is now reclassified as a commercial use, which you will see in the future language. Sprinklers, wider staircases, complex alarm detection systems with notification. The list goes on and on. Elevators, accessibility. You don't want it. It's not necessary. This is a common use of a single-family house. I ought to also say, and this is going to be a recurring theme, that there may be, as the previous speaker noted, an occasional example of someone who is taking advantage of the system. That would be the one rotten apple spoils it for the whole bunch philosophy, and I don't think it's a good way to pass regulation or to drive the creation of the regulation that we are all going to have to live by. Please vote no for this.
Mark Manoli, 178 Housatonic Street. Short-term rentals are a long-standing Berkshire tradition. The state is currently working on regulations. I see this as putting the cart before the horse. Short-term rentals are a way of life in Berkshire County and have been for decades, and not just for the summer. We have a leaf season, a winter season. We just don't have a spring mud season. Well, we do, we just don't get visitors for it. Let's work on that. Working families have depended on this income for decades. Yes, they have. I have. The people that visit are really nice folks, many of whom I have become friends with. We as working families depend on these visitors. They help many homeowners hire and pay for the work they constantly need on their homes. It helps support our entire community. These people keep the economy healthy. We should be working on bringing them in, not finding ways to turn them away. Many return year after year. Many become new residents. I imagine that's happened here. If they can't come and stay on our homes, they will certainly go elsewhere. Let's vote no and support the Lenox economy and working families. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator,
I'm Lauren Franzoni Peterson, 12 Sunset Avenue, and I'm here speaking on behalf of my husband and I, who have enjoyed living here for the last 18 years and look forward to another 18 or more, okay? We wanted to express, we're not short-term rental participants right now, but we'd also like to have the opportunity to look at it in the future, and we'd like it to be under logical, sound, comprehensive types of regulations that are clear and that are statewide and do not give advantages to one community over another. We know the planning board works hard, and we know that there has been a lot of talk about this, and we think there just needs to be more. Many of these bylaws, including this one, are vague. The state is getting ready to set forth its terms. We think we should be looking at that. We think we should come back and look at this in an informed way that does what's most important, which is keeping many, many visitors coming to Lenox to fuel the one real industry that we do have. And we thank you very much. And I would say, please vote no on this bylaw and on the rest of the bylaws, because we feel that these bylaws are too early, too vague, not enforceable, and not good for Lenox. Thank you.
Okay, before we get going, can you guys try to make sure that you're talking to the inspection and the regulation section of this? That's what this bylaw is about, so let's try to keep it into that. Mr. Fisher, go ahead. You no? Go ahead.
I'm Tiasha Sprague, 55 Kemble Street. I am very concerned with additional regulations on general private housing in Lenox, because we have many old houses that do not satisfy the current regulations, and this would be another nail in the coffin of our historic heritage in this town.
Karen Beckwith, Old Stockbridge Road, Lenox. This particular section, Article 12, with requiring inspections, but for what? Registration for paying taxes on income for short-term rentals, which I personally see no problem with, are onerous for the majority of people who may occasionally rent their home out. The people who are coming to those occasional rentals typically are families. We have done this ourselves a couple of times over the almost 17 years that we've been in Lenox. We take the money and we go to Europe. The people who we rent to are families with children. These are not people who are likely to stay in our hotels and our inns. They're likely to go to another town next door where they can rent a house and put the kids to bed and make a meal and not eat every single meal out in a restaurant. So I think that this concept is skewed towards the hotel industry and inn industry, who's feeling some competition from short-term rentals by the quiet majority who want to continue to enjoy an occasional rental. And I think that the board needs to basically take a look equitably towards the majority of the rentals rather than the minority of the rentals. Thanks.
Mr. Moderator, thank you. David Fisher, 25 Neeland Avenue. I just have this phone out because in a real simple, easy look, the Franklin County Conference of Governments, I guess the umbrella organization for all the towns there, have defined what, in their opinion, short-term residential rentals are, and they're to be considered a B&B or lodging house. When I looked at other information prior to this in Pennsylvania, in the Carolinas, and places where this issue is also being debated, almost universally, the law firms that consult with planners say that you absolutely can regulate these to some degree. On a personal level, for those of you who are not looking to rent your homes or see a problem with it, my own personal experience to compare to the ones you've heard from people who want you to vote no on these, on Article 12. I personally do not like living and having bought a home in a residential neighborhood, something that was told to me as being in a residential neighborhood that now is going to have encroachment of commercial activities. I lived in a community that adjoined a commercial zone, and I paid the price for that. When I moved to Lenox, I knew to look at the zoning more closely than I did at my prior residence, and I wanted a residential experience. I do not appreciate the idea that a commercial activity in a residential zone is something that everybody needs to embrace. I realize there's interests on both sides, but I please hope that many of you will vote yes for these because they're very thoughtful.
Wrap it up, please.
They're very thoughtful attempts over a year and a half to find some way to control and be reasonable about the commercial uses in a residential zone. Thank you.
Ralph Patillo, 303 Housatonic Street. My years in the Lenox Chamber has taught me a lot about the lodging industry here in Lenox. And the amount of money that the room tax brings in to this town has allowed us to have this school, this education, and our town the way it is. Without it, we'd be suffering greatly. I would like this to be voted down now until we find out from the state, can we charge room tax to these short-term rentals if it is approved? And before we do, I think the state should be notified that we would like to intend to charge room tax, and that may help the rules and regulations. I agree with both sides of this issue, so it's difficult to make a choice, but at the same time, I think the state needs to weigh in on this before we make any kind of regulations or none. And Mr. Moderator, I think we should call the vote.
He actually, Ralph, you can't do that after you've talked to the question, so.
Mr. Moderator, can I add some
No,
clarifying?
no. I'll give you a chance to speak, but Susan.
Good evening. Thank you to the planning board for all the...
Who are you?
42 Walker Street, Susan Folds. Thank you to the planning board for all the hard work they put into this. This is a very complex issue. There's a lot of gray areas. I have a question, a simple question. Today, are short-term rentals under 30 days permissible under the current zoning rules?
That's a question you can answer.
Okay. It's a complex question. Give me a minute, and I'm going to explain it the best I can. So we currently do have, so there's two types of short-term rentals. We have the rental of an entire home, and we have the rental of a room in a home. We do currently have a bylaw on the books that goes over the rental of rooms. Now, there is a legal question. It ends with an S, rooms. Could that apply to an entire house or just a bedroom? There would need to be a court case to give us an answer on that. But that bylaw is in existence right now and is actually more strict than the bylaw we're going to propose next. We already have a seasonal rental of rooms bylaw that only allows you to rent rooms in your home in the summer. It also does require that you register and are inspected. And when we get to the next bylaw, we're actually going to expand that to be the entire year, not the summer, that you can rent rooms in your home. So there's an idea that this is
Just
a
ban. Question.
We already have something on the books.
Okay.
Wait.
No, wait a second. She's not done yet.
I'm not done.
She just asked a question and she got an answer.
Okay, so I respectfully submit that this is sort of the cart before the horse, that we should be considering short-term rentals and approval of that bylaw, and then looking at registration and fees and anything else associated with that. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Yep.
I'm Ron Maitland, 2B Coldbrook Drive. I call the question.
That works. Is there a second? All right, this is not debatable. This is to call the question. This means that he feels that there's been enough discussed on this, and he is ready to vote on the question. If you feel the same way, vote yes. If you want to hear more discussion, you think there's more to be said, vote no. So all in favor of calling the question, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Yes.
No.
This carries. So we're calling the question. No more debate or discussion. This is Article 12. Okay, so this is Article 12. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Oh, sorry.
Opposed? No. Does not carry. Article 13.
So the next article, Article 13, is to regulate the zoning around short-term rentals. I got to make the motion. I move that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaws by incorporating specific regulations for short-term rentals by deleting the existing section 8.8.1, inserting new definitions in alphabetical order into section 4 definitions of the existing bylaw, and inserting 2 new subsections into section 9 special residential regulations of the existing zoning bylaw as exhibited in the most current copy on file in the office of the town clerk.
Is there a second? Second. Explanation.
So an affirmative vote on Article 13 will allow for the short-term rental of rooms within a private home year-round. It will also allow for the short-term rental of an entire private dwelling during the peak tourist season. It's a new world, and these type of accommodations have become much more popular with the advent of websites like Airbnb. As an example of how popular they are, tonight in Lenox, there's 126 of these listings online. From the beginning of this debate, it has been a very emotional issue, and we understand that. This is not, it has very often been referred to on a lot of things that I'm sure you've seen, you've gotten mailed to, you've seen on the side of the road as a ban. This bylaw in no way bans short-term rentals. It regulates them. It sets a zone where they can happen. It sets a season that they can happen. These are rules that we set for many other things. At the end of the day, this is a commercial use in a residential zone. The very tenet of zoning, the reason that we have a zoning bylaw, the purpose on the very first page says to make sure that we regulate where uses happen and to make sure, as somebody else mentioned before, that the value of your home, for most people, the biggest investment of your life is protected. One of the main ways we do that is regulating that in a residential zone there is not commercial activity. You wouldn't want to see a business pop up next to your home after you've bought it. And so what we're looking to do here is come up with a sensible way to do that. So there really is 2 different sections, but to go over, there are the general requirements would essentially be that you are allowed to rent short-term rental as long as you are the primary resident of the home. You are allowed, there is a parking requirement. Somebody mentioned that before. That's a copy of, we already have a bylaw that regulates what you do in your home. We actually have many of them, but one of them is called home occupation. So it's somebody making money at home, very similar to what we're talking about here. And there we set a limit on the number of cars. So that's simply a carryover from a separate part of the bylaw. We also do require that you have to be registered and inspected. If we didn't call the question, I would have liked to clarify, we do know a lot about what these inspections will be. This isn't an unknown thing. We already inspect many buildings in town. We already inspect apartments in town, and a lot of those same standards would be what is applied to this use. So there is already a very clear path to how that would happen. And so this bylaw, like I said, for rental of rooms in your home would actually expand over what is currently allowed. And it would, for the first time, create a clear legal path to allow you to rent your entire home. There have been 2 court cases about short-term rentals that have gone all the way to land court. In both of them, the land court has upheld that if it is not explicitly allowed in your town to rent your entire home, that it is not allowed. We have a very important clause in our zoning bylaws, and I'm sure a lot of you have not had to read them as many times as I unfortunately have, that very clearly states if something is not listed in our zoning bylaws as allowed, it is in fact not allowed. And attaching that to short-term rentals has happened twice. They went all the way to the land court, and both times it was upheld that they would not be allowed unless you have some kind of a bylaw to allow it, which is what we're looking to do here today. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Paul Marshall. I live at 35 Hubbard Street in Lenox. I'm going to read a short statement. In the recent past, my wife and I have rented out a room in our home for short-term occupancy through Airbnb. The proposed changes to the bylaw already in effect, now there's some proposed changes. It would benefit us personally because instead of being limited to renting rooms in our home only during certain times of the year, we would be able to rent out a room at any time throughout the entire year, assuming that we were registered and passed inspections. But that law does not afford equal opportunity to other residential property owners in Lenox. It places undue restrictions on second homeowners and on those who seek to rent out their entire residence short term. For example, even for something as minor as renting out your home for a 2-week period while you go away on vacation, you would have to be inspected and registered. That seems to me particularly onerous. It's unfair and unequal in its treatment of Lenox property owners. It imposes cumbersome and unnecessary regulation and permitting requirements on those who want to rent short term. It should not be enacted, and I urge you to vote no. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, my name is Billy Keene, 3 Evans Avenue, Pittsfield, Massachusetts. But I'm the chair of the Berkshire Board of Realtors Government Affairs Committee.
Okay, if there's a non-resident who wishes to speak, I need to have at least 10 people who will stand and say that you would like to hear what he has to say. That works for me.
Thank you. My name is Billy Keene, and as the chair of the Berkshire Board of Realtors Government Affairs Committee, I'm here representing the board in our advocacy for private property rights. While we appreciate that there are legitimate opinions both for and against the proposed short-term rental regulation, there are also legitimate concerns regarding the rights of homeowners should the bylaw be put into effect. Courts have consistently ruled that all owners of single-family residences can do one of 3 economically productive things with their property. They can live in it, they can rent it, and they can sell it. To deny equal private property rights based on the status of ownership, opposed to the status of the property, is in our opinion extremely unjust. Whether a primary homeowner or a second homeowner, these individuals pay the same taxes, they follow the same rules, and they apply equal care to the maintenance of their property, and of course they abide by the same regulations. Property rights must apply to the property itself and should not be crafted to discriminate against the person who owns it. If you're not applying laws equally between primary and secondary homeowners, you're not applying justice equally. We urge you to maintain the homeownership rights that have been upheld by courts in Massachusetts for decades. From the vantage point of the real estate business, we can clearly see the shadow this bylaw has already cast over the local economy. 2017 was a banner year for home sales in Lenox. Over $32 million in single-family sales alone. That's $32 million in 2017. Since then, realtors have been ethically obligated to disclose this proposed short-term rental regulation to buyers, and sales have dropped to only $9 million transacted by the third quarter of this year. From $32 million last year to $9 million in the third quarter of this year. We are deeply concerned about the unintended consequences this regulation has and will continue to have on the town's finances. It would certainly be wise to conduct an economic impact study before undertaking a change of this magnitude. We hope that as you strive to determine the right path for your community, you remember to combine the sensible application of inspection and oversight regulations with your responsibility to defend fundamental, judicially determined property rights for all owners in Lenox uniformly. Absolutely, whether primary or secondary homeowners. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, I'm Susan Lyman, 28 Skirmahorn Park. In our neighborhood, there is a house that is, the owners of that house live next door to this, and it is year-round used as a short-term rental. Am I correct, Mr. Spalding, that this article would prevent that from happening?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just want to add, the house is very well maintained. We have never had problems with the tenants, and in fact, the owners who live next door and bought that house improved the property greatly. However, it's in a dead-end residential area and right across the street. We never know who is going to be across the street. It does degrade the character of the neighborhood because it takes a residential neighborhood and makes it a commercial use. And I find it, although very well done by the owners, to in fact have a sort of, as I said, a degrading quality to the neighborhood. Thank you.
Hello, I'm her neighbor across the street. First and foremost, I thank you for being honest. We put a lot of money into that house to fix it up, and surprise, I had another baby, so we needed a bigger house. So we ended up purchasing the house next door to us, and we did not want to sell the house that we just fixed up because we would have lost a considerable amount of money. So I just want to speak to a little bit about that my little home next door is not a business. I invite wonderful people in my home who I filter through the Airbnb service that I have conversations with. I find out who they are, what they're doing, what they like. We talk almost the whole entire weekend. They're not strangers. They're not weird people or kooky people. Why would I want people in my house that are strange or kooky or going to mess up my home? These people love the local culture. They spend their money on Lenox activities and restaurants. These people sometimes cannot stay at inns. Most of the people who stay with me have a dog or they have children. I am pro-taxing, putting occupancy tax. I am pro-people coming in if they want to do an inspection on my house. And we have fire alarms and smoke detectors and all that good stuff. I don't feel that my house next door negatively affects anyone around it. If anyone can know better than anyone is that I live right next door to that house. I see what happens every single weekend, and as my neighbor said, nothing bad happens. So all I just want to say is that these people are not strangers. These people are my global family, and that's what's wrong with, I feel like, this country in general right now, this negative rhetoric against people that we don't know. I think it's nice to keep our hearts and arms open to everyone and welcome people into our community. Thank you.
Beth Tracy Gamble, 47 Tucker Street. I want to speak to specifically those houses that people own and have no intention of ever living in them. They are used as investment properties. On Tucker Street, we have worked hard to build a really nice neighborhood. And right now, what I'm seeing is one by one houses are being bought for investment purposes, which means there isn't ever going to be, at least in the short term, a family there with children. And so the kids that are on the street right now aren't going to get new kids to play with. And the other thing that I'm afraid is going to happen is it's going to adversely affect our schools. We have one of the best school systems in the state. We are close to 50% of school choice. If we allow houses within the community to go only for the short-term rentals, that percentage is going to go up and up, and it might adversely affect the school in terms of kids who are there, how much money we're getting from other towns, and it'll affect sports, and it will affect school activities. So I am in favor of this bylaw because it protects. I'm in favor of short-term rentals. I use them. That isn't the issue. To me, the real issue is those people who are buying moderate to mid-priced houses in town and preventing families from moving into them.
Thomas Folletto, 114 Plunkett Street. Earlier, when you were proposing the bylaw, you alluded to the value of the home. and how short-term rentals are detrimental. And the lady right over there, she just talked about the monetary value. So I'd like to explore that for a brief second. Imagine if you went to medical school. Some of you out there might even have. You've spent 8 years training to become a surgeon, spent $500,000 plus on your education at the finest medical school in the country. You were just hired out of college. It sounds like a wonderful career path. Well, all of a sudden, we do have a problem. Medical costs are too high, insurance costs are too high, and insurance lobbyists are going to try to bring down costs. So all of a sudden, now as a surgeon, you're going to make $15 an hour. How can that be fair? You've put your life into a career, you've nickeled your way through college, and you've busted your butt to get to this point. And now all of a sudden, I'm $500,000 in debt with no reliable way to pay it back at any time. Now, how is this any different from having a second home? It's not. You've worked hard, you've taken a calculated risk and own a secondary home. And all of a sudden, you yourself are in massive debt with no way to pay it back. The surgeon situation seems completely implausible, yet it is precisely what's happening here with these homeowners. We are messing with their livelihood, we're messing with their peace of mind, and completely changing the basic principles of property ownership. Vote no.
Hi, Jim Harwood, 34 Walker Street, Lenox, Massachusetts. This was the part I told you where they're going to change the definition of something you've been doing already, try and prohibit or further restrict something that's been going on for a long time. I would like to note that I learned about Lenox. I have 3 kids in the Lenox school system. I moved here for the Lenox school system. They're all on sports teams. And I learned about Lenox because I had a short-term rental. And if it wasn't for that short-term rental, I would surely be living somewhere else. So I propose an amendment. May I do that, John? Okay. Is this when I read it? Okay. I move to amend the motion under Article 13 we're on, right?
Yeah, yes.
As follows. Occasional rental of 1 and 2 family homes for periods of less than 30 days is and always has been a customary and appropriate use of 1 and 2 family homes in the town of Lenox. As such, it is, has, and always will be allowed by Lenox zoning bylaw.
Yeah, no.
No, it's not in order.
I don't think that's allowed. I think that's outside of the scope of the question to... give me a second, Jim. Oh, boy.
It was worth a shot.
Yeah. No, it's outside the scope. I mean, this is looking to regulate short-term rentals. He's looking to declare...
The motion was about regulating. The motion was about regulating, and I'm suggesting that it need not be.
Mr. Moderator, Joel Bard, Town Council. So the article that you have before you seeks to regulate short-term rentals. It defines it and it regulates it as is clear, I think, to nearly all of you. What's been proposed here is essentially a statement that says, I'll read it, but that occasional rental of 1 and 2 family homes for periods of less than 30 days is and always has been a customary and appropriate use of 1 and 2 family homes, and as such, it is and always will be allowed by the town of Lenox zoning. So, and keep in mind, I'm not here to make policy judgments, but just to make legal rulings. This is making a completely different statement. It's, in a sense, making the opposite statement, where the bylaw is proposing to regulate it, in some ways restrict it severely. This is saying exactly the opposite. It's saying we permit it. And in my opinion, it's outside of the scope of the warrant, because nobody came here expecting the best if you could do, if you will, if you're opposed to what's proposed, is that you leave matters as they are, which in some respects is unclear, in other respects, in my opinion, is clear. This would instead put a positive, an affirmative statement in the zoning bylaw saying that short-term rentals are permitted in this town, and in my opinion, it's clearly outside of the scope of what's been proposed.
So can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Of the attorney. So regulation can't be positive and a regulation can't permit something? Because I'm seeking to have the regulation permit this as it has always been customary.
Right. Mr. Moderator, the answer is yes. Clearly, a regulation can be positive, but what's before town meeting here on the warrant is one that, in your terms, is negative, if you will. It's restrictive. And what you've proposed here is completely positive, and that's not what was before the voters. You could certainly, at a future town meeting, put this on the warrant, but this is 180 degrees from what was on the warrant, and that's why it's outside of the scope. I understand your viewpoint that it is similar in that it's regulating, but because it's so opposite in its proposed form of regulation, that's why I find it outside of the scope.
Okay, so then I'll just summarize. Then, as he states, the regulation is so 180 degrees opposite to what we all know has customarily been going on here and should continue to go on here. I suggest we vote no for this regulation.
Okay.
Mr. Moderator, Steve Seltzer, 390 Housatonic Street. I'd just like to repeat some words from earlier. Restrict it severely. That's the town council. Mr. Spalding, not a ban. Mr. Spalding's colleague on the planning board, Deborah Rimler, and I quote, "The board decided to take a very restrictive stance on short-term rentals, which is really tantamount to a ban in many regards," end quote. This is taking away your rights. I'm going to ask you to vote no, and not necessarily because you mean no, but because you want the town to do a better job. What we don't know is how much tax revenue these rentals will generate, because nobody knows how many rentals exist. Mr. Spalding says 126. Nobody knows, but with the state law, we will know when people register. And even more significantly, the total number of days rented. You can have 126 rentals that rent for 2 days a year. How many days is that? Nobody really knows. Once we know the tax revenue, we can decide how much additional tax burden taxpayers will have to shoulder if this is regulated, because these are all rentals that want to pay taxes that we won't get. So what's the rush? Your no vote really means let's be prudent and wait and see once we know the tax impact. What we don't know is why renting your house for 31 consecutive days doesn't require any regulations. But if you rent it for 29 days, it's now fully regulated. 28 days, it's fully regulated. This is totally arbitrary, and it's not uniformly applied, and the planning board needs to do a better job. I'm all for this. I'm for regulation, I'm for taxes, but I want something that makes sense. So your vote no is simply a message to the planning board to put their thinking caps back on and come up with a better plan. We know that this passing of this will take away valuable rights, including our right to use our home if necessary. I'm almost done. To pay children's education, to pay for a vacation by renting our home, to pay for unexpected medical expenses. Some people won't be able to pay their bills and they'll lose their house. So I think more voices need to be heard and considered, and the impact of more government regulation needs to be justified. I encourage you to give the planning board another chance, another opportunity to regulate rentals, which I fully support by voting no. Thank you.
I'll be really quick. Dave Nottig, 146 Hubbard Street again. I just want to point out, we've never rented our house. It sounds like a lot of work to clean that much, so I don't think it's ever going to happen. Someday we might sell our house to somebody who might want to, though, and I'd hate to take that buyer off the market. And a lot of people smarter than me have talked about all the ins and outs here. I just want to read one thing here. We said this isn't a ban. It says short-term rental of entire dwelling units, presumably for 1 day, requires a special permit, which involves a public hearing. Have you ever been to a Lenox public hearing? That's a ban. I just want to be really clear about that. This is putting so many hurdles in the way of somebody doing this casually that it is a ban. They're just putting a lot of words around it so they don't have to say it's a ban. So I'd encourage you to vote no. Thank you.
Ted Silverman, 520 East Street. I'm going to be fast for my friend Susan over here. 2 things. First of all, just a reminder, this is not about registration or taxation or any of those things. We've already covered that. This is specifically about telling anybody who wants to rent out their home or a room exactly when and where and how they can do it and what they have to do to be able to do that. Kelly and I came here for the first time over New Year's. That would have been precluded from this, so we would not be able to have done that. We came back 2 or 3 times a year for the next 3 years because we loved it so much here. We bought our home here in 2018. I mean, 2000. We've been here for 18 years. I don't see everything I've heard since I've been in this town, whether it's from Gwen, whether it's from Greg Federspiel, who was the prior town manager, whether it's from other people in town, is we want more visitors year-round. Why would we want to be limiting people to May through September? It does not make any sense. We're not talking about thousands of people coming for a James Taylor concert. We're talking about maybe dozens on any given weekend throughout town. If you have a restaurant here, if you have a retail establishment here, I am sure you would love to have even 2 or 3 or 5 additional people each week come in over the winter. This is not an easy place to make a living outside of the summer. Why are we making that even worse? Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Jo Peretti Miller. I have lived in Lenox all my life. I'm at 194 Main Street. I've raised my family here. I'm lucky enough to have 3 grandchildren living here, and I've also been in business here for 40 years. So what that makes me, other than old, is someone committed to this town. I love Lenox. I'm also a big believer in compromise, and I think that this bylaw is an excellent compromise. So it is in that spirit that I'm speaking tonight in favor of this bylaw that is being proposed by the Planning Board. I believe there are some issues that we need to support because they're good for our town, not just good for you or me. And my reasons are as follows. The first is our neighborhoods. Zoning began in Lenox in the late 1960, and its primary purpose was to protect neighborhoods. It was important that commercial enterprises be restricted to the downtown and the Route 7 corridor, and that neighborhoods would be kept strictly residential. When people make the biggest investment in their lives in a house, they want to be certain that the value of their home is going to be protected by zoning bylaws of the town in which they live. It's for this reason that we sometimes give up our right to do whatever we want with our homes in order to protect the rights of all. That's our responsibility as good citizens. We also expect, as one of our inherent property rights, the right to the quiet enjoyment of our homes. And zoning also gives us that, keeping commercial operations out of residential districts. The birth of short-term rentals has severely impacted that right to quiet enjoyment and also that protection of our investment. There are several examples of this throughout town, from Pine Knoll Road, where there's an absentee owner who advertises that his 3-bedroom home sleeps 13, to Cliffwood Street, where there's an absentee owner advertising his residential property as a corporate retreat, or the house on Undermountain Road that is owned by a non-resident and was packed with 30 people one weekend this fall, and the police had to be called 3 or 4 times at 2 o'clock in the morning to curtail the disturbance to the surrounding homes. An absentee owner has no way of knowing who walks into their home, nor how they
Try to conclude, Mary Jo.
nor how they are affecting their neighbors, because it is all done on the internet. We all bought in residential zones, not just because of the value of the investment, but also because we want our children to be safe and our homes to be a safe haven. Short-term rentals are impacting not just our investments, but our right to quiet enjoyment. I believe this regulation for short-term rentals will allow residents to rent their homes for almost 5 months out of the year while minimizing the impact on the neighborhoods. That's a good compromise.
Mary Jo.
Oh, John.
Well, Mary Jo. 2-minute rule, honey.
Come on. I also want to talk about affordable housing really briefly. No?
No, bring it up later.
Okay. Anyway, so I really urge you to vote yes on this. We need homes in Lenox that are affordable for families to keep up the quality of our education, and we need to protect our neighborhoods. Thank you, John.
Sure. You know, if you guys stand way back there, I can't actually see you, so you need to step forward a little bit. Go ahead.
I'm Sarah Hitchcock de Gregory.
Can you get a little closer to the mic so everyone can know who you are?
I'm Sarah Hitchcock de Gregory, 81 Walker Street. We moved here recently because we wanted to be in a small, walkable town where there was a sense of community. I grew up in Massachusetts, but I have to say short-term rentals are what brought us back here. One only had to go to the Halloween event yesterday to realize what this town is and why many of us live here. And while I think there are things to question about, and there are lots of details in these things, and I can understand the arguments of both sides of the questions, but I have stayed in Airbnbs in other places and seen how they have completely changed cities and towns. For example, we were in Portugal, Porto, Portugal, recently in the tourist center. The people whose town this is cannot live there. Their churches don't have people coming to church because they don't live there. And this is because of absentee landlords. I understand that the arguments about primary versus secondary homeowners, but I think the real issue in terms of the rapid change in character of short-term rentals is because of absentee landlords and speculation.
I thought there were some excellent points being, Ronaldo Nagallo, 24 Orchard, about the limitations of entire dwellings being rented out from Memorial Day through Labor Day, and weekends only through Columbus Day. I think that may not be helpful to tourism. So I have a proposed amendment to allow for entire dwellings to be rented throughout the entirety of the year. So I move for an amendment to allow entire dwellings. So should this pass, you would be able to rent your entire dwelling throughout the year.
Second.
Stay up here so we can actually make the motion formal as it's written.
I did not specify.
So let's get out the.
So, may I speak?
It would strike number one.
A second, let me just check this.
Where's the second? Strike number 1 under 9.10.4.
It's getting too complicated.
To the maker of the motion, if you look at clause number 1, do you have it in front of you?
I don't.
All right. So
I'm just looking at the
clause
thing up there.
1 under section 9.10.4 says rentals shall be permitted from Memorial Day through Labor Day and weekends only through Columbus Day. So to put it in the form of what's before us, which we have to do, we change that clause 1 to say rentals shall be permitted for entire dwellings the entire year.
That would be fine.
Period.
No, actually, you're going to make the motion, and then someone's going to have to second it.
All right. So I move to amend it to allow for...
As said.
As said.
Is there a second?
Second.
You go ahead and write it. Okay, we can discuss the amendment. The discussion would be on the amendment that was just made, and this amendment is to allow whole house rentals for the entire season, whereas...
Entire year.
The year, thank you. That's what I meant. My life, I have one season, it's all year. On the amendment only, that's what we're talking about.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Christopher Fenton, 38 Conic Avenue. On the amendment, what it doesn't speak to, unfortunately, and as part of the current article, is if you own 2 homes in Lenox and you live in Lenox, you're not considered a primary in your second home. Would this amendment cover that?
No.
So anyone that owns 2 homes in the town of Lenox, even if this passes, cannot rent their other home under this required.
Under this bylaw, no.
Where does it say that?
If you own 2 homes in town, you can rent your primary residence.
Correct, but I cannot rent my secondary residence.
No. Well, long term, yes, but
Hold on a second, no. Yeah. What are you trying to clarify?
Mr. Moderator, if I understand the gentleman's question, the question is, if you are a resident of the town of Lenox,
Yes.
could you rent a second home in Lenox? In other words, you live in one house, could you rent a second house year-round? Is that the
Correct.
question?
My wife and I own 2 homes in Lenox. We live in one, obviously, and we have a second that we have rented out. We've rented out long-term and short-term.
Right. So my understanding of the restrictions here is that it allows, it restricts the rental of separate dwellings to people whose primary residence is Lenox, and in your case, that is your case. It's your primary residence.
your primary residence has to be the property that's rented.
What's that?
He would not be under this current bylaw because it says that you have to be a primary resident of the property that is being rented, not just of the town of Lenox. It says of the property in the bylaw, not of the town.
Where is it? The
number 4 shall be the special permit shall be issued to the primary resident of the property.
Special permit shall be for the primary residence of the property. Well, that's right. So, right.
So under the amendment that has been presented, it would still stand that you could not rent your second home.
That is correct.
Further amendments could change that.
Short term, you can still rent your home. Long term. All right, again, these comments are on the amendment, which is to change the section to allow rentals all year long on a home. So anyone?
On the primary home is my question. Susan Folds, 42 Walker
Yeah.
Street. For this amendment, are we talking about the primary legal residence or?
Yeah, that's what we just clarified.
Okay. So no comments on the main bylaw, right?
Tom Romeo, 54 Reynolds Street. The question about the amendment all year also pertains to the issue of the primary residence. For an example, we have my wife still retains her mother's house. She doesn't use Airbnb. She doesn't use those. She rents it to B2A. However, come the holidays, there are families in town whose kids want to come back home where they can't fit into their parents' house. And so it's been customary to be able to let them stay in those houses on a short-term basis. And my understanding, the amendment would facilitate that. However, the reason why I would vote no against the regular article is because of the residency requirement. Even though we live in town, this would prohibit that type of rental that would help other family members coming back into town during holidays, which I think is a real shame. So I would urge you to vote yes on the amendment and no on the regular article.
Any more discussion on the amendment?
Thomas Folletto, 114 Plunkett. When the gentleman brought forth the amendment, it was prefaced with the fact that if the amendment, if Article 13 passes, then we would talk about if it's the language in it. Isn't it premature to talk about the amendment before we actually vote on?
No, we have to vote because then you're voting on the article as amended. So, if
But
you
the
understand that.
language, but we're voting on 2 different languages within the article, correct? As whether it's all year or it's only during those certain dates.
If this amendment goes through, then it would be all year, period. That's,
Okay.
it's changing, it's taking away
Okay.
those certain dates. We're just going to do the amendment. We're going to vote on the amendment. We have to vote on that first before we can.
Point of order.
Yeah, go ahead.
It seems to me that we're starting to do this in a rather ad hoc way, which might mean that tomorrow when we realize what we're doing, it's completely different from what we thought we were doing. I don't know if it would be wise at this point to either table the article and have more discussion now that people's attention is focused on all of the complexities and the aspects of it, or whether what we should do is take a brief hiatus and the planning board can think about whether that might be an action we want to take. Judging from the conversations, it just seems like we're mucking around in stuff that people don't maybe understand the full implications of. But that's just my question.
Can we call the vote? Can I ask one clarification?
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
I got a question.
On Article 13, it says that the short-term rentals of entire dwelling units require a public hearing and notice to abutters. I fully support that. If somebody next to me is going to have a short-term rental that built a house next to me, I want to know about it. So
Okay.
I urge you to vote yes on this.
Okay, we're still on the amendment right now, but the only way you can call a question, number one, is to come to the microphone. And you'd be calling the amendment, which we're about to ask for right now anyways. So, the amendment. You're voting on the amendment, which is to allow full house rentals all year long. So, just the amendment. It's not the article. The article, we'll go back to discussions on the article once we've gotten through the amendment. Okay, so we're calling this is for the amendment. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. Ayes have it. All right, it is amended. Now we go back to discussion on the Article 13.
Mr. Moderator?
Sir.
Could I propose an amendment?
I would like someone else to do that. Oh. I think we're going to do it.
By who?
But do you want to do it or you want Jim?
Can I introduce my motion?
You can.
Okay. I would like to move, so we're the next line down from what you were just looking at with the seasonality on entire dwelling units. It currently says under point 2, the dwelling unit shall be the primary residence of the owner or leaseholder with lodging as an accessory use. I would like to say, actually, I would like to strike the second line. Yep. Strike all of clause 2.
So you say I move to strike.
I move to strike clause 2 under 9.10.4.
Is there a second?
Yep. And under 4, the special permit shall be issued only to the owner of the property and shall not be transferable. Subsequent owners shall apply for a special permit in their own name. Change the word primary resident to the owner. This is my personal opinion.
All right, we're going to have to go through that whole thing again because I don't quite have it.
My pen, I gave you my good pen.
Huh?
I gave you my good pen.
Hello? Hello?
We're just trying to get it clarified. We'll be right with you.
I'd like to make.
Yeah, as soon as we have clarification, we'll read the motion over, the motion for amendment over.
Say something?
Not until we're in the middle of a motion. Deleting section 2. I'll give it to you in a second. All right. We're going to go through this whole motion because there is a motion on the floor, but we're going to make sure everyone understands what the motion is, and we'll ask for a second again.
I move to amend the motion under the above article as follows: to delete section 9.10.4.1 in its entirety, into point 2, sorry, it says 1, we'll have to change that, and amend section 9.10.4.4 to delete the phrase primary resident and replace it with the word owner. Would you like an explanation?
Is there a second? Yes, explanation.
So what this would essentially do is remove the requirement that's been much talked about tonight, that the home be your primary residence. It would allow second homeowners or residents of Lenox with second homes to rent those homes as short-term rentals.
The year-round section's already been
Year-round
added
section
here.
already just passed.
Okay, so any discussion right now is on the amendment. Okay, Sue?
Hi, I'm Sue Merritt, 99 New Lenox Road, homeowner, 90 Pittsfield Road, business owner. I think that this process has turned into a debacle. We have lost almost half of this room of qualified voters. And until there is better, greater, more clear understanding of what we're after in these amendments and this proposal, I move that you table this question until people are able to fully understand what is going on here. Because this is too long. It's too much.
Okay. Now, you're voting.
So here's the motion, okay? Let's motion to table this article until the planning board can revisit this issue in its entirety and present it in a clear and votable fashion.
Hold on. All right. First of all, a motion on a motion. We got it. So
I move to withdraw my motion.
Okay, there you go. Is there a seconder? Will you allow Cam to withdraw?
I'd like to comment on that.
Hold on.
Can
Allow
we
him to-
comment on Susan's suggestion that it'll be for Article 12, 13, and 14?
No.
Well, we already did
No. We can only do one at a time.
Okay, we'll do it sequentially.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor to table. I might want to reconsider an option to reword that, or...
So can I try and reword it?
Yep.
For Jim Harwood, 34 Walker Street. Article 13, move to refer this article back to the planning board. That's all I got.
Will you accept that change?
Second.
There you go. As long as you accept that change to your motion, good. Anyone with discussion on this? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Do you guys have 14? Do you have 14? Yeah. Just pass, yeah, just same thing.
Who's going to do that?
Do we table 14?
Take no action.
Yeah. Mr. Moderator,
Hey, order, guys. Quiet.
Neil Maximilian, 754 East Street. I vote to take no action on Article 14. I move to take no action on Article 14.
All in favor? Opposed? Didn't think so. Unanimous. Come on, one more warrant article. You can make it.
Mr. Moderator.
Guys, can we have quiet, please? We're still having a meeting here.
One more article. Has nothing to do with rentals or marijuana. I'm Warren Archie. I live at 34 Reynolds Street with my bride, who has a birthday today. And
Happy birthday, Pat.
And my present to her is to come here tonight and enjoy the fruits of the democratic process. Mr. Moderator, Article 15. I move that the town vote to amend Chapter 9, Financial Affairs, Section 6 of the Departmental Revolving Funds of the Town Bylaws by adding a new subsection, 5.3, to establish and authorize a revolving fund for use by the Land Use Department under, under Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half.
Is there a second? There you go. Explanation, please.
At the request of the town manager, this is an administrative amendment of the town bylaws that establishes a land use permitting revolving fund. The amendment will simplify the processing of various expenses for services incidental to the permitting processes of the Planning Board, Zoning Board of Appeals, and Conservation Commission.
Okay, all those in favor of Article 15, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Okay, before I entertain a motion to adjourn, I'd like to remind you that midterm elections are November 6th. Make sure, if you have not voted already, to make it to the polls. Anyone want to make... Did I hear that? Yeah, is there a second? All right, guys, thanks for making it through the night and being so civil.
Sorry. I was like, where did this come from? I'm like, oh yeah.